The scream that echoed through the hallway wasn't loud. It was raw. It sliced through the school like a knife through silence. For a few seconds, everything stopped. Lockers slammed shut, conversations froze, feet halted mid-step. And then the whispers started. She had never asked to be seen. Ariba was the kind of girl who walked with her head down, books pressed tightly to her chest, as if trying to fold herself into invisibility. She had been at the school for months, but barely anyone knew her voice. She didn't eat in the cafeteria. She didn't talk in class. She simply existed, quiet, fragile, unnoticed. But that Monday morning changed everything. It started like every other day. Ariba had just finished her math test and was heading to her locker, avoiding eye contact like always. That's when they came. Lena, Sidra and Meinl, the popular girls with poisoned smiles. To most people they looked perfect. Polished nails, expensive phones, loud laughs that echoed down the hallway. But behind that glamour were knives, cruel words, sharp jokes, and a hunger for control. They fed on weakness, and Ariba was an easy target. At first it was just name-calling. "Hey, ghost girl," Lena smirked. "You planning to ever talk? Or just float around like a creepy spirit?" Ariba kept walking. "Maybe she's mute," Sidra said, laughing. They stepped in front of her, blocking her way. The hallway was mostly empty. Most students were in class. No teachers around. "Maybe she just needs some help loosening up," Meinl said, tugging at Ariba's scarf. That's when everything snapped. In one horrible second, they yanked the ends of her dupatta. The cloth slid off her shoulders, exposing the neckline of her shirt. Meinl reached and pulled harder, buttons popped. A small crowd was forming now, silent and wide-eyed, phones slowly rising, recording. And then Ariba screamed. It wasn't fear, it wasn't pain. It was rage. Before anyone could understand what was happening, Ariba's hand shot out with brutal speed. A clean, precise punch struck Lena right in the throat. The hallway gasped. Lena stumbled back, choking hands at her neck. Sidra reached for Ariba, but Ariba turned, stepped aside, and grabbed Sidra's wrist in a tight lock. With a twist and a shove, she sent Sidra stumbling into a locker. Meinl, frozen, stared in disbelief. "Don't," Ariba said, her voice shaking but clear, her chest rising fast with breath, "ever touch me again." The students around them stood stunned. Phones stopped recording. The silence was different now, charged, breathless, changed. Within minutes, a teacher rushed in. The girls cried crocodile tears, saying they were just joking. But the footage told the truth. The video had already spread. Ariba, standing there, clothes disheveled but eyes blazing, became a symbol of something more than a fight. It was a moment of rebellion, of someone finding their voice in the middle of humiliation. The school called her parents. There were meetings, investigations. The bullies were suspended for harassment. Their social status crumbled overnight. The same kids who laughed at Ariba now looked at her with a mix of fear and admiration. But the real story wasn't the punch. It was what came after. Ariba had always been alone, afraid of being seen. Her quietness wasn't just personality, it was survival. She came from a home where speaking up meant trouble, where strength wasn't allowed to bloom. She wore silence like armor. But that day, something inside her woke up. The next week, she didn't eat in the bathroom. She sat at a corner table in the cafeteria, and slowly, other students began to join her. Not out of pity, out of respect. One of them was Sana, a girl who had once been bullied herself but had stayed silent to avoid trouble. "What you did," she said to Ariba. "You gave us all permission." Ariba wasn't magically healed. She still had days where she looked down, where anxiety curled in her chest like smoke. But she was no longer invisible. She joined a self-defense class. She started writing stories about girls who stood up, who fought back, who weren't perfect but were powerful in their own way. She became a voice for others, not because she wanted fame, but because she finally understood being quiet didn't mean being weak. And strength wasn't about violence. It was about choosing to rise, especially when the world tries to strip you down. By the time the school year ended, no one called her Ghost Girl anymore. They just called her Ariba, the girl who stood up when everyone expected her to fall.